The ships were named after small town America. Canon was named after Canyon City, Colorado, and another small town called Canon, Georgia. And so there was Marathon. It was named after Marathon, Texas. And one of the ships was Antelope. Antelope was named after a small town in Wyoming. Now, with a Navy ship goes through a christening. When the keel is laid, a ship is christened. And then, of course, it is built. And then it is commissioned. And when it is commissioned, it becomes part of the U.S. Navy. It becomes an operational asset. And the commissioning of a naval ship is a very special time in the life of that ship, and a very special time for the crew. And so it's a large ceremony, and a little smaller ceremony for a PG, but still a large ceremony. And people in the chain of command and local community are invited for that ceremony. So the commanding officer of the Antelope sent an invitation to the mayor of Antelope. And the invitation was received, and the people got together and they elected a mayor, and then they sent him. So, oh, when we went in the river, as I mentioned, very fast running, about 5 knots. And that created a ship handling challenge, but it also created a security challenge, because some of the other ships that had been up there before I had gone, and with Sea Float itself, had been attacked by what we call sappers, Viet Cong swimmers who would just float down with the current and then maneuver. You could maneuver fairly well. And then they could attach explosives to the side of the ship or to the Sea Float platform, that type of thing. So we, based on this intelligence that we had been given, and based on what the other ships had done, we had planned, in fact we did, drop a concussion grenade over the side of the ship every 15 minutes through the night. And that kept the swimmers away, because it's very dangerous. Well, first night up there, we steamed up to Sea Float. We got the ship anchored and everything bedded down, and we were ready for all contingencies there. I had a young sailor on deck who would, of course, drop those hand grenades, throw those hand grenades. So I was down watching the movie. I just started, and all of a sudden, I was almost blown out of my chair. I mean, it just rocked the whole ship. So I went running up to topside, and I grabbed that young man, and I said, "Throw it, don't drop it." Well, there was a petty officer up there, and he said, "Captain, he threw it as hard as he could." I said, "I don't believe it. You watch him again." So I went back down to watch the movie, and so about 15 minutes later, the same thing happened. So I went up, and he said, "Captain, he threw that as hard as he could." So with that aluminum hull ship, it was sort of a traumatic event, and I said, "How in the world are we going to sleep with that going on?" But like all sailors and all soldiers, you learn to overcome that, and soon we were sleeping soundly through each one of those concussion grenades. One of them was my engineman chief. He had spent most of his career in submarines. His name was Trigoning. He's from Upper Michigan. We called him Trigger. And Trigger had, he was a salty individual. He and I got along very well, but he was a very pragmatic, a very worldly. Things didn't bother Trigger. And so we, of course, had helmets and flak jackets. After one of our incidents, There was a young man whose helmet had been pierced by shrapnel, but it had saved his life. Another young man had shrapnel embedded in his life jacket, and so they took these around as a training device to say, they work, use them. But I could never get Trigger to wear a helmet. And as I said, he was an engineman chief. And the designation for an engineman chief is ENC. So we went out on a patrol one time, and he was not on board. He had to go over to sick bay because he had wrenched an ankle. And so we went out on a patrol, and we got into a world-class fight, wound up with a major fire in the engine room, which of course was his duty station. Lost an engine, wound up with a hole in the side, damage to the hydraulic system. And so we came back, and he came to the ship. And I was touring the ship the next day, and I went down in the engine room where they were making some repairs to the engines, and I went back to what was called the control console, and sitting right there on the shelf was a brand new haze gray helmet, and stenciled on the front in 4-inch letters was ENC. So from that point, Trigger always wore his helmet. He had a wonderful sense of humor. He married late. He was in his early 30s, and his wife was 8 months pregnant when we went to Guam. And she delivered their first son about a month after we were in Guam. And so he left about a year later. So he was going home to see his 11-month-old son for the first time. So we're sitting over at the Chiefs Club having a beer before he leaves, and I said, Trigger, what are you going to do when you see that son for the first time? And he said, well, sir, he said, I'm going to sit the little fellow right down in the middle of the living room. He said, I'm going to put several things in front of him. He said, I'm going to put a slide rule. I'm going to put a medical book. He said, I'm going to put an architectural digest. And he said, and then I'm going to put an open-end wrench. And he said, every time the little fellow reaches for that open-end wrench, I'm going to slap his hand. The camaraderie is important, but the most important thing is making a difference. Making a difference in how this nation progresses, making a difference in our capabilities as a nation to do what we want, making a difference in maintaining freedom and things that are very precious to us. I know that when I got more senior and I would speak to people and I would participate in fora and things of that nature, one of the wonderful things about this nation is that people can speak their mind. And when I would be accosted is a strong word, but be asked a question with a great deal of intensity and fervence, my staff would say, doesn't that bother you? And I'd say, no, it doesn't, because I've been wearing this uniform a long time so that they have that right and that capability. So it's making a difference and participating in the nation, participating in your citizenship, and meeting people and learning people and seeing places that are just mind-boggling.